Can you hear the rain? Holy shit, it's pouring out right now. It's like, holy crap. Well, I'm gonna turn up the sensitivity on the mic for this. Can you hear it? It is raining like a mother out there. Holy crap. It was thundering earlier, and now it's a cow pissing on a flat rock. Anyway, hi everyone. Well, it's time to finish book 2 tonight. I got my orange drink on my left. Gonna position the mic directly in front of me, as there's no reason for it not to be right in front of me. Got the book brought up here. And I think we're just gonna hop right into it. Because who knows, if we finish early enough, well, I won't promise anything. But I would like to play a game tonight, if possible. Who knows? We'll see. Okay. As the sun began peeking over the horizon, Emiko and Nonami were already awake and were settled in to watch it. Still in their tents, fast asleep, both Usuko and Rei were snoring, the red onis being especially loud, but Nonami was used to it. To Nonami, watching a sunrise was akin to Emiko watching the sunset, though without her yokai crystal, Nonami wouldn't dare to do so without some manner of protection. "Sure is gorgeous, huh?" asked Emiko, glancing over at the vampire. "Indeed," she replied, albeit quietly, "though the sunrise always gives me mixed feelings." "Because you're a vampire?" "That," admitted Nonami, "but also because the sunrise is what killed my mother so many centuries ago. She had a garden she always tended, predominantly black roses among other flower types. One morning, I suppose she got so caught up in her work that she didn't notice the sun until it was too late." "Jeez," sighed Emmy, placing a comforting hand on Onami's shoulder. "Sorry to make you bring that up." No, it's quite all right," she replied calmly. "I've long since made peace with it. Besides, just about every vampire family has at least one member who died by the sun." Just then, her phone rang, intruding on the otherwise peaceful morning. "Yes?" she asked, a slight bit perturbed by the interruption, but maintaining her professionalism. "Nonami here." There was a momentary pause, and then Emiko saw Nonami's eyes go wider than they'd ever been. "What happened?" 10 minutes later, and both Usuko and Rei were awake and stood at attention with Emiko, as Nonami prepared to explain what she had just been told. Oh my god, it's raining so much out there. Sorry. It would appear that our Yeti friend got loose from its cell back at headquarters and proceeded to release nearly every prisoner that was being kept in the containment wing. In short, there's been a jailbreak, and we're being called back to help recapture the escapees. Fortunately, Madrid and Lydia were successful in getting the building under total lockdown before anyone could escape the structure. Unfortunately, it means that they're locked in with every murderer, man-eater, and worse that Gardner was holding. Which is to say, more than a few. Does anyone have any questions before we head off? Usuko, who had been groggy before, but was now wide-eyed and awake, raised her hand. "Are we, qualified to do this? I mean, paper talismans and yetis are one thing, but a whole freaking mini prison? Not gonna lie, I'm scared." Nonami placed a reassuring hand on Uzuko's shoulder. I understand, believe me, but they need every available hand they can get. They were lucky enough to get the kittens out before it got really bad. But I hear Lydia was badly hurt by an omukade. Sarah and Hyoka even took down a hellhound, which is impressive. Hyoka? Asked Emiko, turning to face Nonami. She wouldn't normally be so deferent to the vampire she was currently contesting leadership with, but even in her pridefulness, she understood the gravity of the situation and accepted it. For now. Yes, Hime managed to regain her memories, it appears, and discovered her true name was Hyoka. Nonami glanced at the Oni. Now, if there's no more questions, we need to get going. Rei, Emiko, I hate to ask, but since we're pressed for time and you can both become Shutendoji, will you fly us there? Rei was already mid-transformation by the time Nonami had finished speaking, and Emiko wasn't far behind her.
Yes, she replied, but if it's all the same, I'd like to carry Uso-chan.
That's fine, said Nonami, climbing onto Rei's shoulders and locking her arms around the girl's massive crimson neck. But let's get going. 2 minutes later, and the Oni were flying towards headquarters at top speed. They hadn't even had time to pack up camp, such was the urgency of the situation, and all 4 girls knew it. Usuko, in particular, was still pretty worried, despite Nonami's reassurances. Sure, fighting a mind-controlled Emiko, or samurai skeletons, or even a feral yeti were their own things. But a bunch of hardened criminals? That scared her. She had learned enough about Gardna to know that they only incarcerated the absolute worst of the worst. Unrepentant killers. Otherwise uncontrollable beasts who ate humans, and worse, were kept there. True, they also kept those who were keen on revealing themselves to humans on a whim, like that one Shirime that had scarred Usuko for life. Google that, you will not be disappointed. But they were at least allowed to wander relatively freely, with the understanding that they couldn't leave unattended. No, what they were about to face were genuine monsters. Emiko, Her voice faltered as she struggled to find the words. When we get there, please, don't leave my side. Emmy made a loud guffaw and turned her head towards Usuko.
Usuko, we've always faced whatever came our way as a team. This will be no different, I promise. Remember that time in 6th grade, when that gang of bullies came after you? I had your back then, and I'll have it now.
Usuko hugged her a little tighter as she felt a bit of the fear die inside of her. Emiko was right. They'd always faced challenges together as a team, no matter how large or insignificant. Emiko was always there for her. Usuko began replaying Emiko's earlier confession in her head then. Thinking back, if she'd known that they were going into this dangerous of a situation, maybe she would have said something different. Hey, Emi-chan? And then HQ came into view. The tallest building in Fumizaki, Ayanami Industries, stood over 50 stories tall, and it was burning. Badly. It had suffered some significant damage previously, when the possessed Usuko had caused one side of the octagonal structure to explode, and had damaged several other parts, but that paled in comparison to what they saw now. Fire trucks were already on the scene, but as AI was a restricted area, they could only fight the exterior flames as best they could.
Are we too late?
Shouted Rei, a bit of apprehension sneaking into her voice. I can only hope not, whispered Nonami as she directed Rei to land on a nearby rooftop. Both Oni touched down and their passengers disembarked. Nonami motioned for both of them to change back to human form, and they did so. We can't fly in, she said. Too much smoke. I doubt we'll be able to see where we're going. We also don't know how badly the fire has weakened the structure already. Landing on the roof could cause it to collapse, and that's the end of me and Usuko. So what do you suggest? asked Demiko. "We just waltz in the front door. Place is sealed up tight, Nanami. I doubt even me and Ray together could pry the doors open at this point." Nonami nodded and began pacing. By now, the sun was about halfway over the horizon, and the light was casting weird shadows on the ground below from all the smoke. "I might have an idea." The first thing that hit Usako was the smell. It was indescribable aside from the obvious. Sewage stank. Nonami's idea had been simple enough, if not the most pleasant thing in the world. They were going to use the sewer system to get to the atrium pond and thus into HQ. Simple in theory, but in practice, they'd been wandering around for a good 30 minutes without any sign of the drain they were looking for. No one was happy about the situation, but they all knew it was likely the quickest way in right now. A complete lockdown meant that all the exterior windows and doors were sealed off with 3-inch thick steel plates, which were then electrified for added fun. Of course, even in a lockdown, you can't shut off water and sewage. Thus why Nonami's plan was sure to work, assuming they could just find the right drain.
I hate this,
groaned Usako, pinching her nose.
I don't remember signing up for a tour of the sewer tunnels when I joined y'all.
This isn't even in my top 10 worst sewers I've ever had to explore, replied Nonami. You're my niece, aren't you? Act like it. Usako blushed at the admonishment, but it reminded her of what her mother would say when things were hard. You're a Takibana, and Takibana women are the toughest in the world, so show me you can be tough, Usako-chan. Just then, she saw a shadow zip by in the corner of her eye, so she turned and shined her flashlight in the area. Nothing. Hey, Nanami, she asked, picking up her pace ever so slightly. Does anything, live down here? The vampire turned to her niece and tilted her head. What, aside from the rats? Not to my knowledge, no. Why? Did you see something? She noted that Usako's face had gone pale, and she was now pointing behind Nonami, so she turned around and was nearly face to face with something that could have been an extra in The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with scaly green skin, webbed hands and feet, fins, a fish-like face, and most noticeably, one arm. It was also wearing a soaked and tattered security uniform as it slowly hobbled towards the group. Alright, I'm gonna do a little trick for this voice here.
Is that you, Lady Issei?
It called, its voice distorted like it was gargling water as it spoke.
You gotta help us, please.
Whew, that's a hard one to do. It took her a second, but Nonami recognized him as Murphy, the Gilman security agent, who usually worked the front desk with Josuke, the kappa. Apparently, whatever had happened up there had been pretty serious. What happened to your arm, Murphy? Asked Nonami, motioning for Usako to come closer.
Some, dog thing ripped it clean off.
He replied, rubbing the back of his thin head in embarrassment.
I know I can regrow it, but damn, this really sucks.
Nonami nodded and glanced at Usako, who wasn't sure what Nonami wanted from her. Realizing this, she spoke for her niece. Usako here knows some minor healing magic. I don't know if she can regrow your entire arm, but she may be able to jumpstart the process. Usako, do you mind? No, I don't, she replied hesitantly as she approached Murphy. I just don't know if it'll work. Last time I did this, it was mostly on instinct more than anything. Well, here goes. Summoning her bat, as it worked to focus her magical abilities, Usako placed the end of it on Murphy's stump and channeled her healing energies into it. His biology was a lot different than Nonami's was when Usako did this the first time, that was for sure. But apparently, since his body was already genetically coded to regrow lost limbs, Usako's magic did indeed supercharge the process. From the stump, first came a small, deformed baby hand, followed by a wrist, forearm, and then eventually a new elbow and bicep. When it was done, the new limb was weak and spindly, but Murphy was able to move it with only a little practice.
Wow,
He exclaimed, flexing the arm to test its range of motion.
that would have taken months otherwise. Oh, you're big, Miss Takibana. Thank you.
Murphy is hard to do. I'm glad I could help. I'm glad I could help, she replied, holding down the urge to throw up. Watching that arm sprout and grow was something that, if she never saw it again, it would be too soon. So, since you're down here, I'm guessing you could guide us to HQ? Murphy squealed, an odd sound coming from him as his mouth parts flared out in alarm.
What? Why would I want to go back there, huh? I almost died. I got an agenda for today, and dying isn't on it. Can't fit it in either.
Usako reached up and smacked him, cutting her hand on one of his sharp fins. Ow! She muttered, holding her palm with her other hand. Emiko took that moment to speak up. Look, you're security, right? It's your job to protect HQ. I get maybe what's happening is above your pay grade, but we're here to make sure that everything in there doesn't get out. All we need you to do is lead us back the way you came, then you can go back to hiding, all right? Murphy glanced to the side, his pride clearly more wounded than his body.
Yeah, all right.
He said, his fins twitching reflexively.
Sorry, I'm just a little shaken up is all.
I think that's the last spoken line for Murphy, thank God. Making their way down the tunnel, Emiko made sure to check on Usako's cut. It wasn't too deep, but down here it could get infected pretty easily. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a white handkerchief and tied it firmly around the pinkette's palm. You tell me if it starts to hurt more, or if the blood seeps all the way through, she instructed her. Once we're inside, we should hopefully be able to find some first aid supplies to treat it properly. Why did you feel it necessary to slap him, though? Usako sighed, cradling her injured hand as she walked. They were far enough back from Murphy to avoid the awkwardness of him overhearing their conversation. I don't know. I guess I just couldn't believe someone who's supposed to be in charge of protecting people would just run away. In his defense, said Ray, the first thing she'd said since they got here, Guy lost an arm during, a literal prison break. I don't completely blame him for letting his fight or flight take over. Yeah, I guess, responded Usako, lowering her head a bit. I suppose I got some instant karma there, huh? Finally, they reached the drain. Of course, it looked more like a miniature waterfall than anything else. Working deftly, Nonami was able to jimmy the grate open and crawled in. Usako was second, helped up by Murphy, followed by Emiko, with Ray at the back. This didn't completely sit right with Emmy, so she spoke up. Wouldn't it make more sense to have an Oni at the front and back? She asked as they crawled on their hands and knees in the 2-foot-deep water. That way we have a powerhouse on either end in case we run into trouble. Normally I would agree with you, replied Nonami, her quieter voice partially drowned out by the sound of flowing water in the metal drain. But I need to jimmy the lock ahead open as well. Ray can't do it, and I wasn't sure if you had that skill. That said, Usako and I together should be able to fight off anything that might greet us as we emerge. At least long enough for the two of you to crawl out. That explanation seemed to satisfy Emiko, though, even as it did, another thought popped into Usako's inquisitive mind. Hey, don't the old stories say that vampires can't cross running water? She asked, causing Nonami to stumble. We can't, she replied, repressing a giggle. But I'm not crossing running water, am I? I'm going against it. But Emiko sighed, shaking her head and letting out a single chuckle. Usako, she's messing with you, she said. That's just a myth. Though I must say, I wonder what's gotten into our nocturnal friend. She's acting rather out of character today. Ray, being at the back of the train, was only able to make out snippets of the conversation, but did manage to make out enough of what was said to know she had an answer.
She's like hopped up on wild blood,
She explained.
that raccoon she drank earlier is acting like about 3 cans of Red Bull on her system, and it's probably only just now taken effect. Things are probably gonna get super weird.
And then it was then that they reached the source of the pipe. The pond's drain was right above them now, and Nonami was quite literally clinging to the ceiling as she worked on the lock. "Everyone get past me," she called to them. "As soon as I open this, a whole lot of water is going to come rushing out that way, and I don't want to wash any of you away. Now then," with one final quick twist, she pulled the lock off, and about 1,000 gallons of water came surging out of the hole. Usako felt kind of bad as she watched the poor koi fish get washed away, but she reminded herself that it was for a greater cause. When the flow had finally slowed to a trickle, Nonami scurried up the vertical shaft, Usako and the rest not far behind. The atrium was huge, covering a good 2,000 square feet, with ponds, trees, and usually home to dozens of small birds. Surrounding it were floor after floor of living quarters for both Gardna personnel and the inhabitants who weren't able to leave the building. Those living quarters went up a good 60 feet, and at the very top was the glass skylight, currently sealed off and making the area much darker in addition to the smoke curling around them. As Usako's eyes adjusted to the light and heat around her, she could make out a familiar voice calling out to them.
Hey, Hime!
Shouted Usako, rushing to embrace her chilly friend.
I heard you got your memories back. That's great news, right? Yes,
replied the snow girl.
and though I don't wish to belittle the name you gave me, Usako, I also remembered my name is Yoka.
She paused.
But I think if you want to call me Hime still, that'd just be alright with me.
Usako smiled. Whatever you want, my friend. Emiko felt just a twinge of jealousy, but pushed it back down. Of course the two were going to be close. Usako was the girl's first friend and had even given her a bloody name for crying out loud. There was nothing to be jealous of, and yet the Oni couldn't help herself.
So where's Sarah and the rest?
Asked Usako, her own question answered when she saw the Banshee, a severely wounded Lydia, and a hobbled Madrid conversing. I heard things were bad, but this... Is everyone okay? Yoka shook her head.
It's bad. It's been bad. We've managed to contain most of them, according to Miss Pendragon, but
She had to stifle a sob.
some of my friends, they didn't make it.
And then Usako saw it. The body of Josuke, lying face down on the ground, shards of a strange black glass poking out of him all over.
Mr. Josuke, he died trying to protect a group of kitsune pups from this weird black faceless thing.
Nonami, conversing with Sarah, snapped her head towards them. Faceless? She asked, fear clearly audible in her voice. No. It got loose. Oh gods, no. Please, anything but it. Ray, too, was shaken up by this revelation, her face turning frighteningly pale as she spoke but one word.
Deathstalker.
Okay, said Usako, confused but clearly alarmed by Nonami and Ray's reactions. Someone want to fill me in? Emiko? The brunette shrugged, turned to Usako and shrugged. I've never heard of it either, she replied. Must be something not from around here. Lydia, despite her wounds, decided to speak up. She knew exactly what the thing was. After all, she had been part of the team that had initially captured it. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, she explained through labored breathing. The whole thing was like... A single living piece of tissue, like a cancer given life. 20 of our best agents were sent to capture it when it first appeared in Maine 3 years ago. Only 5 of us came back. Me, Nanami, Ray, Marjorie. Anyway, this thing wiped an entire town off the map in less than an hour. It feeds on organic life, uses it to make itself larger, thus the whole cancer thing.
How did you bring it down?
Asked a now thoroughly terrified Usuko, peeking over her shoulder just in case. You know the old saying, kill it with fire? Replied Lydia. Yeah, that seemed to slow it, to hurt it. But the best we could do was to contain it. To contain it was to put it on ice, lock the door, and lose the key. From behind Ray there came a slithering sound, like a slimy snake crawling across the floor. Reflexively, the Oni pivoted just in time to avoid a black, snatching tentacle that had attempted to grab her. From out of the shadows it crawled. Its thin body appeared semi-humanoid, though made of many dozens, if not hundreds, of black, writhing tentacles. The only part of its body that was of a clear difference was the oversized, bulbous white sphere that Usuko assumed was its head. Completely featureless and impossibly smooth, it almost looked like an egg made of flesh. In a flash, its tentacles parted in dozens of places and fired multiple shards of a black, glassy substance at the assembled group, fortunately only striking the spirits, for whom it passed through harmlessly. It was impossible to tell if the Deathstalker even knew it had missed, but all the same, it began slowly slithering towards them. It had no legs. Its body tapered off at the waist before separating into a dozen or more tentacles that seemed to stretch out several feet in every direction. Realizing it used these tentacles as its main method of locomotion, Usuko immediately summoned her shotgun and fired at the stalk-like lower body in an attempt to sever it. Instead, the blast only passed through it, peppering the wall behind it as the Deathstalker continued making its way even closer. They soon realized it had no immediate interest in them, as it picked up the body of Josuke with massive appendages formed from its arms before the head opened to an impossibly wide angle, revealing thousands of razor-sharp teeth. The thing's head looked like it was barely even being held on. There was but maybe a scrap of skin keeping it connected, but apparently it was enough. It dropped the Kappa's body in, and then its maw snapped shut. There was a sickening splurt sound, followed by a single crunch, and then it turned around. To Usuko, it looked as though the thing had grown slightly wider, but that was it. The whole thing was too much for her, though, and she released the contents of her stomach onto the floor. There then came a tremendous roaring, which at first Usuko thought was coming from the Deathstalker. Then she saw Ray, in full Shutendoji form, barreling at it, tears streaming down her face, and were those flames wreathing her wrists? Back here. Give me back my friend! She bellowed, a light post ripped from the ground in hand, as she began using it to bash the thing's head. It seemed only slightly perturbed. However, when it noticed the flames now emanating from the fully enraged Oni, it recoiled and let out a hissing sound. Since when could she do that? Asked the dumbstruck Emiko as she watched in both horror and awe. This is the first I've seen of it, answered Nonami, equally as awestruck. Not by Ray's ferocity, of course. She had seen Ray enraged like this before. Many times, in fact. No, it was the flames now pouring off of her like an aura. Somehow, miraculously, the flames weren't burning the area around her, though she did leave singed footprints in her wake. The same could not be said of the flames she was directing at the Deathstalker. Its body contorted, and it continued to hiss as it tried in vain to escape the Oni. Before today, it had never known fear. It wasn't even a concept the creature understood. But now, with several 100 pounds of red Oni bashing it, burning it, and screaming at it, it was now something it understood all too well. After a minute of this, Ray took the metal end of the post and slammed it into and under the Deathstalker's head. It looked like she was trying to use the thing as a wedge to pry the bulbous egg-shaped head off. Scared, but not beyond the capacity of thought, the beast used its tentacles to grab at Ray's arms, trying to restrain her, as it parted its body in preparation of firing more of the glassy substance. Ray, however, had other plans. Snapping the tentacles with sheer power alone, she threw the light post aside, picked up the Deathstalker, holding it over her head, and, with a mighty roar, she ripped it in half. Throwing the two now lifeless lumps of flesh on the ground, she projected another fire blast and incinerated what was left. When the flames finally died down, all that remained was a small pile of black ash. And stay down, she said with a heavy sigh, kicking the ash pile. Oh, typo, says ash pie. The ash pile, and transforming back to her regular Oni form. She didn't have the strength to keep up her human disguise right now, nor was she able to keep herself from sobbing loudly, tears streaming down her face. Cautiously, both Nonami and Usuko approached her, placing a gentle, caring hand on either of her wide shoulders.
You two knew each other a long time, didn't you?
Asked Nonami softly. Ray nodded slightly, her large arm reaching around and pulling Nonami in for a hug. She nearly resembled a large teddy bear being held by the nearly 8-foot-tall Oni. He was the first friend I ever made here, whispered Ray between sobs. Even before I came to work here. When I'd come to give my big brother his lunches, I'd always see Mr. Josuke there at the desk to greet me. He'd always crack a joke or two, usually at my brother's expense, and we'd laugh. Her sobbing continued, but despite it, she stood up. I won't let his death be for nothing, she declared, clenching her fists so tightly Usuko could see the veins in her arms popping out. I'm gonna bring in every last one of these guys. Just you watch. As that was going on, things were happening at the main entrance. Oh, you just missed a good part, Akagi. I'm so sorry. As that was going on, things were happening at the main entrance. The steel plating that covered the doors had been cut away, and two figures had made their way inside.
Leave it to Mizuzu to muck up a simple errand and get herself caught,
commented the first, as she side-eyed the area with barely disguised contempt. You got that right, answered the other, much shorter of the two. He was carrying an axe, and his long silver beard was stained with blood. Well, I can't imagine she'll be too happy to see you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Kosaka turned on her heel and sneered down at the gnome who'd said that. I don't give a damn about how she feels, she laughed. Though, I suppose I almost have to thank her. Not only did her actions result in quite the potential job fair for us, but it's put our adversaries into quite the state of disarray. Lord Aramanes may be quite pleased when he hears of this. John Smith just laughed back, though his sounded far more deranged. Long as I get a single Bessie here into someone, I'll be just fine. Yes, of course, she answered with a hand wave. Just make sure you don't kill the Takibana girl, or Maria von Orlach. Those two are mine. What was that again? Asked John as he jammed his axe into the wall for the hell of it. Because I have something special planned for my dear old friend, No Nami, replied Elizabeth, speaking the vampire's code name as though it were a curse.
A bit of payback, you might say. To see the look on her face as I rip her dear niece's limbs from her body would be most enjoyable.
You're right twisted, you know that, said John as they made their way towards their destination.
Coming from you, I'll choose to take that as a compliment.
Neither of them noticed a small, hairless creature with long, curved spines, or as a small, hairless creature with long, curved spines hustled out quickly through the hole they'd entered in and scampered away into the shadows. Things were bad. Like, really bad. Not like, oh my god, the milk's gone bad and I drank it bad, either. No. Cecily knew things were super duper bad. From her safe room, several blocks away, where she was huddled with her nieces and protected by around 20 armed guards, she was watching live footage coming in from both HQ's security cams, as well as the live news footage covering the blaze. Ms. Nakamoto, came the voice of her aide/head of security, Setsuka Ibarazaki. Typically, Cecily only relied on Lydia when she needed advice on how to run Gardna, but Lydia couldn't always be there when Cec needed her, which is why the younger sibling had chosen Setsuka. Despite rare creatures having a reputation for being ferocious and usually simple-minded, Setsuka was a very intelligent and calculating young woman. Being a were-shark, she was also one of the most physically powerful races in existence, on par with Oni and giants.
Yeah?
Replied Cec, not turning her gaze from the screens.
What is it?
There's a call for you. Your sister. Shall I put it through? The lime-haired cat girl nodded, picking up the rather archaic handset. The safe house was old, and while the tech that protected it was state-of-the-art, a lot of what was inside wasn't.
Lydia, are ya okay?
There was a pause on the other end. Yeah, I'm hurt, though. They're sending me and Mata to the safe house, too. Just wanted to give you a heads up that we're coming. Cecily could feel tears of both fear and relief forming in the corners of her eyes.
Please, be safe, sis. I don't want to lose you, too. Either of you.
Lydia gave a weak chuckle before wheezing in pain.
Ow, hurts to laugh.
Don't worry, sis. You won't get rid of me that easy. Back in the atrium, Lydia ended the call and turned to the girls. She felt guilty for having to leave them behind, but there was no way she could lead them. Not in her current condition, anyway. Usako had offered to heal her, to try anyway, but she declined. You need to save your strength, she'd told her, knowing their worst fights may well be ahead of them. Girls, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You're in for hell. We're counting on the 5 of you to...
Make it 6,
came the voice of Hyoka, stood behind Usako.
I'm going to help my friends. Plus, I owe it to Mr. Josuke.
Lydia nodded, continuing. Very well. We're counting on the 6 of you to contain the remaining prisoners. I sent a full manifest of the who's who here to your phones. But there shouldn't be too many left at this point. But the ones that are possibly the most dangerous of the lot, said Mordred, finishing Lydia's sentence for her. Of note, there's the werewolf twins, Jimmy and Bimmy, a homicidal Takuma, a chupacabra, a sleazeball of a vampire named Lord Northrop, and a lamia named Mizuo Kirishima, and of course, the Yeti. In addition to this, there are going to be a few dozen low-level crooks, but I have faith that the lot of you can take care of them. Best of luck. Oh, and Usako. The Pinkett looked at the knight as she hurled her sword, sheathed but regardless, at her. She barely managed to catch the thing, nearly falling to the floor as it weighed a ton. I'm going to want that back, but I think it'll treat you better than that bat of yours. Good luck. With that, escorted by a team of 6 security officers, Lydia and Mordred made their way out of the atrium and towards the safe house. Lydia was praying that she would see them all safe and sound when this was all over. But she also knew the danger they faced. Before we begin, we need to establish the chain of command, stated Nonami, turning to face Emiko. Princess Ayomea, I know that leadership of this group is a contested thing right now, but I will ask you to put that aside for the moment, for the sake of the mission. Emiko sighed, waving her hand dismissively. It's fine. I was going to defer to you anyway. I don't have much combat experience. Certainly not with this sort of thing, at any rate. To be honest, neither do I, replied Nonami, sounding a bit unsure of herself. This is something new to me as well, but I'm going to try my best regardless. Sarah began making her way to the front of the group, a determined expression on her face. Nonami, you know I wouldn't make the suggestion lightly, but maybe it would be best if I led this mission. I've actually dealt with a prison break type scenario before. Managed pretty well, too. Sure, it wasn't this level, but even still. Nonami turned to Emiko, then back to Sarah. I don't have any complaints, if you don't, Emiko. The brunette nodded and opened her mouth to speak when an axe came flying at her face. Emmy barely dodging the thing in time as the blade took a few strands of hair off her bangs. "Aw, crikey, I missed!" came a voice, echoing through the atrium. "That was me favorite axe, too! Bloody hell!" Immediately, Emiko shifted to her Oni state and roared in anger. Nonami, too, changed to her true vampiric state, floating in the air with a red aura around her. "Who is there?" That was French, not German. "Who is there?" she demanded, summoning the breakdown spear in her right hand. "Ah, if it isn't my dear old friend Mary," came a second voice, its owner waltzing carelessly from behind a pillar. "It's been far too long, old friend. I wonder if you even recognize me." Immediately, Nonami's eyes went wide when she beheld the woman before her. Standing roughly 5'9", with sickeningly bright yellow hair, red eyes, and wearing a white cloak, this woman couldn't possibly be anyone other than... "Elizabeth," she breathed. "You're alive? That's impossible. They saw you fall. 2,000 feet. Maybe you should have considered that, being a Dhampir, my body could and did survive. Certainly not without injury, but I recovered well enough." Elizabeth reached up and threw her cloak off to reveal the combat outfit she was wearing underneath, though calling it an outfit may be a bit generous. Consisting of nothing more than a series of straps, garters, and strategically placed pieces of fabric covering her sensitive areas, with 2 sais, stakes, and even a few guns hanging from them. She looked like an extra from an incredibly weird porn movie. Deftly drawing one of the obsidian-bladed... typo! Bladed sais... Underwear, even. She lunged at Nonami, an expression of pure hatred etched onto her features. "First, I'm going to make you bleed, Orlok!" she screeched as Nonami blocked her with a smaller blade she managed to summon in the nick of time. "Then I'm gonna make you watch as I torture your dear little Usuko over there. I'll pull her limbs off one by one and peel the skin from her body." She let loose a peal of sadistic laughter, grabbing a second sai and plunging it into Nonami's arm. Or she would have, had Emiko not lined back or tackled her from the side before pummeling her face with a series of rage-fueled punches. "No one hurts my Usuko!" Ow. Both touched by Emiko's response and a little freaked out that this weird, leather-obsessed woman apparently wanted to cut her open, Usuko saw Sarah motioning for her and the others to follow her out of the atrium and towards where the tracker and the werewolves said they would be. "We can't just leave them back there." "We can't just leave them back there," protested Usuko as they walked through the smoke-filled corridors. Sarah, having gotten the hang of her air powers now, was mostly blowing it out of their way, but the pinkette was still having some issues breathing at times. We can and we must, she replied coldly but firmly. Nanami knows what she's doing, and plus, she has Emiko with her. She's got this. But Usako wasn't convinced. Emiko was her best friend. She wasn't gonna just leave her to the mercy of whatever that was. You go on ahead. I'll catch up once I have them. Sarah just sighed, nodding as her, Ray, and Hyoka made their way onwards. She knew the three could handle a couple werewolves no problem, which was the main reason she let the girl go. Besides, there was something to be said about the bond between friends. In the time since the second team had left, Emiko had managed to turn the tables on, or Elizabeth had managed to turn the tables on Emiko and landed a reverse axe kick to her abdomen, forcing the Oni back. She knew damn well she'd lost a couple teeth and definitely had a black eye, but aside from those minor injuries, she was fine. Physically, at least. Mentally, she was thoroughly enraged, dumbstruck, and just all around nettled. This Oni was a lot stronger than she looked, and Elizabeth noted with a slight bit of dread, was only in her first form. While she'd been downed, Nonami had been able to recover from the initial attack and had called on the spear once more. This time, however, something about it was different. In its original form, the breakdown spear was really more of a large crucifix made of steel, with gold trim around the entire exterior edge. Inlaid at the center was a large red diamond, which glowed in even the lowest light. The patterns in the gold on the blade were ornate and seemingly random, meaningless scribbles to anyone but Nonami, who knew their origins. However, now it had changed. Where it once had been only gold and silver in color, it was now gold and bronze. As well, the new bronze parts had a series of jagged lines, similar in appearance to a mountain range, all throughout it. The gold had stayed the same, but the gem at the center now glowed orangish yellow, and Nonami felt a strange sensation coming over her. As she attempted to attune herself to this new feeling, another axe, or rather the same one from before, came flying at her. Instead of dodging it, however, Nonami raised an arm, and a wall of stone erupted from the ground, catching the axe before returning to whence it came. "Oi, you cow!" yelled an annoyed John, lunging at Nonami from where he'd just thrown the axe. "You think you're cute? Give me back my axe, now!" I suck at an Australian accent, I'm so sorry. Nonami sighed, and a hand made of stone burst through the floor and grabbed the gnome mid-flight before flinging him out a nearby hole in the wall. "Such an inconvenience," she sighed. The airborne gnome barely missed colliding with Usako as she re-entered the room to find Emiko still locked in combat with Elizabeth. It looked like Emiko had the advantage, but then Usako saw the Dhampir reaching for one of the guns strapped to her. It was clear to see that Emiko was too focused to notice, and Usako knew if she yelled now, she'd just give the woman the opening she needed. Instead, Usako drew the sword she'd strapped to her hip and summoned her wings, shouting as she soared at Elizabeth and brought the sword down on the arm that had a gun aimed right at Emiko's heart. Just like that, it was over. At least, that was the first thought that went through Elizabeth's mind. Years of planning, years of humiliation, all for nothing. She was about to die, killed by a mere child with powers she didn't even understand. Elizabeth saw the wings then, and it all made sense. How this girl was so powerful, how she could... And that takes care of that, stated Emiko, hoisting the unconscious Dhampir over her shoulder. It had only taken one swift blow to the head to knock her out, after Usako had shattered the blade trying to cut the woman's arm off. Still, it had been a relative success, and Usako had managed to save Emiko's life regardless. "Hey, Uso-chan," she said, calling to Usako. "Thank you. You saved my life for a second time now." Unfortunately, Usako was currently about 1,000,000 miles away, as she held what was left of the legendary blade in her hands, while the words, "I'm gonna want that back,"
echoed in her mind mockingly.
I am beyond screwed, she muttered, so epically, utterly, and massively beyond screwed.
You, all right? Asked Onami, waving a hand in front of Usako's unblinking visage.
I've never seen her quite this freaked out before,
Said Emiko, knocking on the pinkette's head like it was a door.
Hey, anyone in there? Earth to Usako.
Usako shook her head like she was coming out of a trance, dropping the handle and standing up. No one tell her, she cried. Marty'll kill me. Why? Asked Onami, genuinely stupefied for some reason unknown to Usako. Because I just broke Excalibur! Nonami started laughing, and now Usako was fuming. What was so funny about all of this? Usako, sighed Nonami a minute later, wiping a tear from her eye. That wasn't Excalibur. That was one of Madrid's pranks. Replace her regular sword with a glass sword and get someone to use it. They think they just broke a holy relic, and she gets a laugh. The vampire turned to face Elizabeth, who was groaning pathetically. She tends to only do it to people she considers friends, though, so there's that. Sip.
Speaking of,
Said Emiko, setting the Dhampir down before bending the legs of a cast iron table into bindings to secure their foe.
you two knew each other. I want to know how.
Nonami nodded, her eyes locked on the person she'd once called friend. It was 7 years ago now. I was on a team with Lydia, Madrid, Christina, Ray's brother Tetsuo, and Elizabeth. We were all very close. Thick as thieves, you might even say. We had been sent on a mission to return a stolen amulet to a temple of Tengu in the Rocky Mountains. We ran into some trouble there. Some ice wraiths thought we looked like a tasty meal, I guess. We managed to fight them off. All but one. Elizabeth was wrestling with it near a cliff face. Too close. One wrong move, and we all watched in horror as she fell. We were near the top of the mountain, and the cliff went all the way down. We assumed she had died. When we tried to recover her body, it was gone. Tetsuo assumed a bear had dragged her off. But now I suppose we know the truth. She survived and blamed me. Probably blamed all of us. You're damn right I did, she moaned, struggling in vain to break free. I swore bloody vengeance on you all, and I started with that fool of an Oni. You really think he just let himself be crushed under train tracks? I paralyzed him with a poisoned dart and pushed him. I would have come for Lydia next, but the damn cat was too well guarded by then. Madrid, too. And even in your rage, you were smart enough not to come after me or Christina, said Nonami coldly. Well, I'm sure Ray will absolutely love to hear what you did to her brother. I doubt even Emiko or I would be able to save you. Not that we'd want to. Elizabeth spat and laughed. You let her kill me, and you lose a large wealth of knowledge about our organization, our plans, about just who it is that wants to crush Gardner, and about Lord Aramanes. Everyone in the room froze. They knew Aramanes, or at least something claiming to be the Dark Beast, was on the loose, and here was someone who was able to confirm that. She was right. They couldn't tell Ray, much as Nonami wanted to. Damn you, she swore, striking Elizabeth across the face. The Dhampir merely smirked before losing consciousness again. Take her to lockup, declared Nonami, not even wanting to look at Elizabeth. And get back here quickly. We have a Takuma to find and pacify. The 2 detention levels of Gardner were designed in such a way that it could double as a bunker through just about anything short of total annihilation. Sealed off from the rest of the facility, It had complete autonomy with its own separate power, air, and water systems, as well as being coated in about 10 feet of titanium-lined concrete. Though the main cells had been too badly damaged to be usable at the moment, the backups were just as secure as they had been. It was a simple matter for Emiko to hurl the unconscious Dhampir into one of the holding cells. Excuse me. But regardless, Usuko wanted to come with. She didn't like being away from Emiko while all of this was happening, even if she was becoming a capable fighter in her own right. She was just more comfortable being around her friend. Friend? Emiko's confession was still fresh in her mind, and Usuko kept finding herself coming back to it again and again, and every time she did, she felt this weird sensation. She felt oddly warm, but also a little bit guilty. Emiko had bared her soul to her, and all Usuko had to reply with was, "I need to think about it." She knew it wasn't exactly a selfish thing to say, far from it, but regardless, she felt like she had lied to Emiko. She knew exactly how she felt. She had just been too afraid to admit it at the time. Her pulse was pounding hard now, and she felt it escalate when Emiko spoke to her. "Hey, Uso-chan, don't worry. We got this. You and me." That was it. She couldn't take it anymore. "Emiko, I love you!" Both girls stopped walking, the Oni's cheeks turning bright purple as she blushed. Usuko? Usuko shook her head, trying to make herself focus. Ooh, there's an extra 2 in there. Sorry, I needed to get it out. I should have said it earlier, but I was scared, I guess. I'm sorry. Emiko switched back to her human form for a moment and took Usuko's hands into her own. For a long moment, they merely gazed into each other's eyes before the pinkette closed hers and leaned in closer. Emiko, too, closed her eyes and brought herself in close to Usuko, their faces nearly touching, their lips quivering, longing. And that's where we're going. No, I'm kidding. A loud hissing sound shattered what was nearly to be their first kiss, and both girls glared in the direction it came from. Standing in the middle of the hallway, nearly taking up its entire width, was a bizarre, violet-hued creature. It had a single, bloodshot green eye in the middle of its head, which twitched in every direction as it scanned the room. Lacking legs, its main method of locomotion was flight, provided by 2 very powerful bat-like wings. Its mouth was massive, with sharp teeth the size of daggers, and were nearly as long as the lone horn cresting its head. In other words, it was a one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. "What is that thing?" cried Usuko. "Sure looks strange to me." The Takuma!" snarled Emiko, transforming back to Oni form. "Damn thing couldn't have picked a worse time. Be careful, Usuko. These things are known to be man-eaters." Well, I'm fine then, I guess." She laughed awkwardly, calling on her magical girl form. "After all, I'm no man." So awkward. With that, she charged at the Takuma, swinging her bat and clobbering it on the head. It hissed in anger, swiping at Usuko with razor-sharp talons, but she managed to dodge in time, the claws only shredding a bit of her skirt. Not one to be outdone by her little friend, Emiko laid into the thing with a hard right hook to its jaw, her fist knocking out several of its teeth. Seizing the moment, Usuko swung her bat once more, knocking the Takuma unconscious. "Done and done," said Usuko with a grin, winking at Emiko. "We really are a great team, huh?" With minimal effort, Usuko floated up to Emiko's face and planted a kiss on her cheek. "But then, we always have been, huh?" And then she started glowing. In a different part of the building, Sarah's team had just finished taking down the werewolves. Well, it may have been more prudent to say that Ray had done it, as the Red Oni still had some frustration to vent, and the poor brothers had been the perfect targets. As they groaned in pain, Nonami came into the room, a somewhat concerned look on her face. "Has anyone seen Usako or Emiko?" she asked, glancing around. "I sent them to take someone to lock up a few moments ago, and I haven't seen them since." Sarah shook her head in a negative. "Nay, she left to find you and Emiko. I trust that fight went well, aye?" Nonami side-eyed Ray, and for the briefest moment wanted to tell her the truth. But she knew she couldn't. Not right now, anyway. "It went all right. Dealt with an old friend I thought was dead. Turns out I was very wrong. It's probably more fair to say Emiko did the heavy lifting there. I just fought a gnome." "What's a gnome?" asked Hyoka, tilting her head in confusion. "This is getting out of hand. Now there's two of them," thought Nonami with a small laugh. Small human-looking fellas," explained Sarah. "And I mean small. Maybe a foot taller or so." Her words were cut off as she beheld the bright white glare coming from a nearby hallway. It almost reminded Ray of the light that came from Usako when she first put on her yokai crystal. "What on earth is that?" asked Hyoka, floating to the head of the group. "And is it just me, or does anyone else smell flowers?" Finding their way to the source of the light, they found Usako floating in the air as Emiko watched in utter bafflement. As if on cue, the shine faded immediately, and the pinkette fell unceremoniously to the floor. "Ow!" she groaned, picking herself up. "What just happened?" "Her outfit," came Ray. "It's different," added Sarah.
"It's very nice," finished Emiko with a blush.
"What are you all talking about?" asked Usako, her arms spread wide. "My outfit?" Here," said Hyoka, using her powers to create an ice mirror for Usako. Indeed, her magical girl outfit had changed drastically. Where it had once resembled a cross between her school uniform and a ballroom dress, it was now a much tighter fit. In fact, it was nearly identical to the one Madrid had given to her a couple weeks ago, only white and gold with pink highlights. On her chest was a yellow starburst pattern with pink stylized heart shapes on either shoulder. The elbow-length gloves she wore had the same starburst pattern on them as well, as did her new tights. The additional item that was added, that Usako particularly liked, however, was the tiara that now adorned her head. She also definitely appreciated having a much shorter lower half to the outfit. That dress made combat a bitch, but now, with a skirt that was more decorative than anything, she felt more confident. So much so that it didn't even register that she was basically wearing a unitard. "Whoa, I look kinda regal, huh? That's pretty cool. "Well, if you want to get technical," said Nonami with a grin, "you are vampire royalty. Second for the throne after my son, actually." Her expression then went incredibly solemn as she muttered, "Oh God, you're the second from the throne. Oh God, you're the last remaining Saiyan." "Back to the matter at hand," she continued a moment later. "Did you two take care of your task?"
"We did,"
replied Emiko, not elaborating more than was needed. Nonami sighed in relief. Good. That was something she didn't want to have to deal with herself if she could help it. She was about to open her mouth to give further instructions, but was cut off as a massive roar came from the atrium. A very familiar roar. Despite having had a portion of her tail sliced off and being beaten pretty hard, Mizuho had to admit she was having a pretty good time with her new friend. Already, the two of them had killed over 24 agents and security personnel. She was actually quite surprised to learn that her big hairy friend was not actually one of her group's mind slaves, a problem she easily rectified, of course. But even still, she had to wonder why it was here. Yetis were territorial, sure, but she doubted that was it. For some reason, her mind kept going back to that one kill she'd made when she'd first gotten to town. that loner human on the mountaintop. She recalled hearing a loud roar similar to this that night, too, but... I'm sure it's nothing, she said to herself as she pulled a knife out of her 22nd confirmed kill of the day. Say, big guy, what say we make our way out of here? I got some friends I'd like you to meet. The beast merely glared at her as it kept walking. Apparently, it was still self-aware enough to realize it was being controlled, but not strong enough to fight it. Not that Mizuho cared. On the contrary, she couldn't give less of a damn. As long as he did as he was told, he could stay miserable. You were talking about friends, came a muffled voice from behind a nearby wall. Don't suppose you meant me, did ya? John crawled out from the hole he'd been thrown through earlier, now missing his red cap and looking much the worse for wear. When he made eye contact with the Yeti, he reflexively took a couple steps back. You were going to introduce us then? He asked with a slightly terrified chuckle. It was when John... Oh, typo. When John took one more step back that the Yeti got mad, letting out an ear-splitting roar that nearly deafened the two. Johnny made Christmas! Yelled John. What's got in a name? Couldn't tell ya, shrugged Mizuho. But I should ask, what are you doing here? The gnome glared at her, wiping some of his long silver hair out of his face. What do you bloody think? To ride you out, you dip. We fought that vampire friend, Elizabeth. She ended up getting caught, and she ended up getting caught. Mizuho nearly doubled over with laughter at the thought of her biggest rival getting caught trying to rescue her. Then why are we still here, huh? Let's get going. You got what you came for. Plus we have a Yeti now. John glanced at the big hairy beast, nervously. Yeah? And what do we tell the others, huh? When we come back without Kosaka, people are gonna have questions. Again, if you're Australian, I'm so sorry for this terrible, terrible, terrible accent. Putting on her best sad face, Mizuho replied in what almost sounded like genuine sincerity. We tried our hardest to save dear Elizabeth, but even with the help of our Yeti friend, our enemies were just too strong, and they took her from us. Wow, you almost got me believing that, said John, sounding impressed. Years of practice, replied Mizuho smirkingly. John nodded sagely. So what do you plan on doing about them, mate? He then asked, pointing to the entirety of Usako and her friends who had now entered the atrium. Eyeing them up for a brief second, the Lamia ran a few mental calculations on their odds. What do you think? She replied. Leave the hairball and run like hell! Planting a palm squarely on his face, John was deftly hoisted up by Mizuho, who shot like a rocket out of the room before anyone could react. Damn, she's getting away! Shouted Sarah, readying a tornado blast from her hands. Come on, we gotta get her! We gotta get her! Nonami just shook her head, her eyes locked on the Yeti. No, we have to bring this thing down first. HQ is locked down. We'll find them afterwards. From everywhere around them, suddenly there were dozens of former inmates, low-level crooks who had nothing else to lose. Instinctively, the girls circled up as the Yeti stood back, seemingly allowing this to play out. Hyoka, for some reason, seemed to recognize him in a way she couldn't explain. Maybe she was still missing a memory or two after all. So caught up in that thought was she, that she missed most of what Usako had been saying. Apparently, the Pinkette had spoken up with a plan on what to do, and had nearly finished talking now. Assemble! She shouted as each girl took to a group of the crooks with their own unique powers. Nonami, calling on her vampiric seduction to lure foes in so she could entomb them in stone, summoned from the ground. Ray, charging like a fiery mad bull into a group of them, throwing those she could grab into the ground with force. Sarah, using her intangibility to deliver kicks and punches to those she could reach, and hurling gusts of wind to knock down those she couldn't. Hyoka, with her ice powers, was incapacitating foes like Nonami, only with the added bonus of not being able to be hit. Usako and Emiko, working together, magic blasts and oni punches, felling any and all comers as they fought side by side and back to back. In mere moments, they had taken down the thugs and were ready to engage the boss. Looking at him again, Hyoka's final lost memory clicked into place. Gohan! She shouted, catching the Yeti's attention. Why are you doing this? Oh, God. Why are you doing this? It's me, Hyoka. Please stop. It tilted its head. Gohan knew this one. This one was Friend. Gohan failed Friend once, but Gohan must kill enemy. No, do not kill. The Yeti, Gohan, was clearly struggling internally, gripping his head and letting out pained roars. Hold on, wait, you know it? Exclaimed Usuko. And Gohan? I do, answered Hyoka. I met him one night not long after I moved in. He was foraging, and I had just cooked some sweets, so I offered him some. He, took the whole mixing bowl, but brought it back the next day. We worked out a system where he'd bring me food, meat and berries and stuff. I'd cook it up for him, and in exchange, I'd get some for me. That's partially why I named him Gohan. Gohan roared again, tearing at his head. Then why did he attack us before? Asked Nonami, her spear pointed at Gohan. He probably felt guilty for letting me get killed, I think, explained the Yukiona. So he probably decided to guard the area with his life. Or something. She approached her fuzzy friend and placed a hand on him. Gohan, please stop this. You have to fight it. Speaking from experience, that isn't exactly easy, said Emiko with a sigh. Those nanobots. Assuming that's what's causing this, and I have every reason to think it is. They change your thought patterns. Make you hate. Make you want to kill the ones you love. However, you being a spirit puts you in a uniquely advantageous position. As she was about to explain further, one of Gohan's outbursts smashed a nearby wall and sent rubble careening into Emiko, striking her in the head and knocking her out cold. Usuko rushed over to her side immediately, tending to the bleeding. Rei and Nonami knew they had to act quickly. They had to act quickly now if they were going to end this. Picking up the vampire and holding her at shoulder height, Rei then hurled her at Gohan, Nonami's own claws, such as they were, at the ready. No! Cried Hyoka. Please, don't hurt him! Acting on nothing more than instinct, Hyoka began drawing in all the ambient energy around her. The temperature in the room began dropping like crazy, and even the lights flickered a bit. As well, Gohan could feel the pressure on his brain fading away, his thoughts becoming clearer. Seeing the incoming vampire, though, he put his massive arms up in a blocking move, deflecting Nonami into the ground. Somehow realizing what was going on, Usuko called to Rei, who was stomping towards Gohan, a chunk of concrete in her hand, ready to smash. Don't attack him! He's not under mind control anymore! The Red Oni turned to Usuko, her expression befuddled. You absolutely sure? She asked, still holding the chunk tightly. It's not that I don't trust you, Usuko, but how can you be sure? Usuko just shrugged. Call it a hunch. It looks like Hyoka drew in a lot of energy just now, right? When Sarah drained the ones in Emiko, she did something similar, didn't she? Sarah blushed, despite herself, at the memory. Aye, that's true. Though we got a little too close for comfort, in my opinion. Rei seemed to consider this for a moment, before letting go of the chunk. Gohan looked around himself. He was in an unfamiliar place, a place currently covered in frost and ice, as a small blue girl was hugging him tightly. Immediately, he recognized her as the one who makes food, even though she looked incredibly different now. He smiled. He hadn't failed then. Or maybe he had, and this was a second chance. Either way, Gohan the Yeti reached a hand down to Hyoka and tried to pet her hair, his hand passing through her as he stared and let out a confused grunt. It's me, Gohan, she cried, snowflake-shaped tears floating from her eyes. It's Hyoka. I'm okay now. You don't have to fight. It's okay. Gohan let out another grunt, this one more inquisitive than before.
They're my friends, and they're sorry they hurt you before, but you did kind of go after them first.
The Yeti let out a small roar, followed by a series of grunts and chortles.
Yes, yes, you're very strong, we know.
Yoka turned to her other friends, smiling widely.
It's okay now. He's not going to hurt anyone else. I promise.
It was at that moment that the vampire, Lord Northrop, jumped from the shadows and at Usako. Instead, however, he collided with Gohan's outstretched arm and was promptly rendered unconscious with a subsequent kick from the beast.
Well, aside from him,
said Hyoka with a shrug and an awkward grin. It took another 2 hours before the fires could be fully extinguished. When all was said and done, and by then all the stragglers had been taken care of. Sarah found the hole John and Elizabeth had used to enter, and subsequently himself and Mizuho had used to escape, so the search for them was called off. Upon returning home, worn and weary, the first thing Usako saw was Kuriko lying on the ground, looking paler than usual.
Kuro-chan!
She yelled, rushing to her sister's side. Are you okay? And then she saw why her sister was in the state she was. A small, spiked critter with a proboscis tongue was latched onto her leg.
Get off her, you little monster!
She yelled, calling on her bat. However, Kuriko stopped her, blocking Usako with her body.
Don't hurt Chupa-chan,
she pleaded.
He got hungry, and I didn't have anything for him.
Usako put the bat away, a look of confusion on her face. Chupa-chan? Had she already named the thing? Great. Last thing she needed was a blood-sucking pet. And then Sakura walked in, saw Usako in full magical girl mode, Chupa-chan still latched to Kuriko, and promptly fainted. When all was said and done, just under 100 Gardena personnel had perished during the breakout, a number that would have been much higher had it not been for Usako and her team. That was why, 1 month later, they were gathered in the atrium once more, though not for any fights this time, but to receive medals from Madrid, Cecily, and Lydia. For showing exemplary valor, courage, fighting on in the face of sheer adversity, we award you these medals of heroism. The esteemed leader of Gardena was wearing her official clothes today, a black, pinstriped pantsuit. Her long, blonde hair kept neatly in a French bun. The cats were also dressed nicely. Lydia in a little black dress, and Cecily in a sundress and bonnet. The first to receive their medal was Nonami, as she had won the right to leadership of the group after an 18-hour session of Pac-Man against Emiko, only barely scraping by with a difference of 1,000 points between them. As a show of respect, however, Nonami declared Emiko as her second in command. She accepted her award gracefully, taking her seat next to where Rei should have been. Her whereabouts were known. She had gone into the mountains to train on her own. She was still taking the death of Josuke really hard. The next to go up was Usako, not really owning any fancy clothes of her own. She instead wore a sparkly green dress that had been her mother's, at Sakura's insistence. Usako was currently being analyzed by the science staff, given her new form, but thus far they hadn't been able to determine what had caused it. They'd been analyzing everyone, it seemed, given their development of elemental powers, but one thing was clear, and that was Sarah was having way too much fun blowing air up people's skirts. As the Pinkette looked out at the crowd, she saw a lot of faces she didn't recognize, but some she did. Kuriko and Sakura, of course, as well as little Chupa-chan, who had been housebroken by Kuriko. They had needed to also adopt a pet goat for the time being, so the diminutive creature could feed. Fortunately for the goat, Mr. Fuzzy, as Sakura had named him, Chupa-chan was a runt, and therefore didn't need a whole goat's worth of blood. Claire and Carrie, dressed adorably as ever, the former wearing her usual roller skates. Murphy, wearing all black and holding a picture of his lost friend. He hadn't taken the news of Josuke's death well either, and had decided to retire early. Aru Sarugami was also out there, flanked on either side by his Oni friends. Usuko could also just barely make out the wild hair of Christina Pavlovic, standing at the far back of the room wearing a black suit, shades, and holding what looked like a grabber claw. Sat behind where Ray should have been were about 6 red-haired, purple-eyed kids who Usuko had been told were her younger siblings. Ray, apparently, was only the middle child in her family. Emiko's father was also sat in the same row, beaming with pride and cheering when he saw his daughter receive her award. All in all, the ceremony only took about half an hour, and afterwards everyone went to the after party for cake and punch. Everyone, that is, except for Nonami. They had moved her to an isolation cell for the time being, the most secure one in the entirety of Japan. For the most part, Elizabeth had been relatively cooperative with their attempts at questioning her. Apparently, she took delight in her interrogator's discomfort when she explained every gruesome detail of what her group, Megiddo, as they called themselves, planned. Their goals were simple: establish monster supremacy over humans, wipe most of them out, and use any survivors as slaves or cattle. How they planned to go about it, using Aramanes to destroy mankind city by city, country by country. They had already tested many of man's weapons against his ebon form, and nothing short of a nuclear bomb had even scratched him. If even that could do nothing, what could? This time, however, Nonami would be questioning her alone. She would be foregoing the usual this time, as she had her own things she wanted to ask her former friend. "Good afternoon, Elizabeth," she said as she entered the side of the cell reserved for interrogators. "I must say, orange is not your color at all. Shall I ask them to provide you something more your style? A roll of electrical tape, perhaps?" Elizabeth laughed, rolling her eyes. Her hair had grown a couple inches since she'd been put here, and her roots were starting to show. "I see your sense of humor hasn't changed, Maria. Or should I call you Nonami now? That's what you're going by these days, is it not?" "Whichever is fine," replied Nonami, pulling up a chair to the 5-inch thick wire-laced plexiglass window. "Now, I have some questions for you. Not, I think, the ones you've been asked before." She cleared her throat and looked the Dhampir right in the eyes. "What happened to you that day? Where did you go?" A shadow passed over Elizabeth's face, and her fist tightened so hard her palms started to bleed. "You mean after I fell 2,000 feet? After you lot left me to die? What do you think I did? I made my way back. It took weeks, wandering those woods. I got hungry, ate some campers, stole their car. That was when I first saw my reflection, and let me tell you, I looked bad. Part of my face was missing, and the part that wasn't was scarred beyond belief. Fortunately, the blood I drank from those poor saps helped me regrow some of my skin, but it wasn't enough. Needed more." Nonami nodded. She'd heard the news reports about those missing campers, and how their car had turned up several hundred miles away, stuck in a ditch. "After you ditched the car, what then?" she asked, nearly feeling a spot of pity. "What then? Well, first chance I could, I drank some homeless guy. Tasted terrible, but it got me looking almost normal again. Healed the last of my skin wounds, anyway. From there, I tried to access my bank account, but, funny enough, I couldn't. See, someone had told them I was dead, so my funds were lost to me. I wasn't like you, born with a damn silver spoon in my mouth, or my annoying cousin and her idle friends. I relied on my Gardner checks to live, and without those I had nothing to my name." Her tone began to grow exceptionally bitter. "Do you know what I had to do to survive without being suspected of being a vampire? I had to sell myself, Maria. On the streets, in the clubs, I had to whore myself out to whatever Tom, Dick, or Jane wanted some fun, and I hated myself for it. I lived like that for 2 years in this podunk little town in Cousin Fuck, Arkansas, before I finally got my out. I met Mizuho. I believe you've heard of her. Back then, she was a gun for hire and had a hit out on a local politician. I found out and took his head off before she had the chance. Told her she could keep the money. I just wanted out of there. Elizabeth motioned for a glass of water. Nonami obliged and placed it on the rotating table, sending it over to her. Once she finished her drink, Elizabeth continued. We worked well together, even if we quickly realized we hated each other's guts. We eventually met up with John Smith, that gnome from before. He's a serial killer from Australia. No one ever expects a garden gnome to come alive and attack them, which was his biggest advantage. He's also a genius with technology, even created that little beauty we call the Cerberus program. Helped us recruit a lot more like-minded individuals. Eventually, we had enough people that we could work towards our goal. Yes, we know all about that, said Nonami, interrupting her. Elizabeth, for what it's worth, I am sorry. We looked for you for hours. I wanted to keep searching, but it was getting light out and the mission had to be finished. I came back multiple times after. I am so sorry. A small, almost microscopic part of Elizabeth smiled at that, but it was quickly squashed by her sheer hatred. Whatever, she said dismissively. Is there anything else you want to ask? Standing up, Nonami turned to leave. Just when she passed the threshold, though, Elizabeth spoke once more. Farewell, Nonami. If I may leave you with this, though, take care of that Takibana girl. You do know what she is, don't you? Of course, she is the last surviving dweller, or at least is descended from them. The Dhampir just laughed and laughed. Fool. True, maybe part of her is. But she is also so much more than that. Cackling, Elizabeth walked over to her bed and laid down, as Nonami exited, now even more perplexed than when she'd come down here. Of course Uzuko was the last dweller, unless her grandmother and father were still alive. Something more? What could Elizabeth have meant? Of course, she could have just been toying with her, Nonami thought. Only time, it seemed, would tell. The party had been over for about an hour now, and only Uzuko and Emi were still there, standing outside at the balcony, both watching the sparkling night sky. Emiko had worn a shimmering blue dress that nearly matched both Uzuko's in how sparkly it was, and the sky above them now. Her hair kept in a fancy bun behind her head. Absent-mindedly, Uzuko's free right hand sought out Emiko's left and held it. Both girls immediately began blushing. So, does this mean we're official? Asked Emiko, still looking at the sky.
I think it does,
replied Uzuko quietly, not able to help a smile crossing her face.
Emi-chan, I'm glad that out of anyone it could have been, you chose me.
Or she squeezed a little tighter, and Emiko was a bit impressed with just how strong Uzuko had become. Of course, she replied, smiling. Friends till the end, Uso-chan. And then some. Both girls leaned into one another, hands held tightly, as they pondered what the future would bring for them. Would it be joy or sorrow, or perhaps something in between? Neither could know, but whatever would come their way, they'd face it together, as a team. And that is the end of Book 2 of War of the Yokai, Winter Snow. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me, everyone. I really appreciate it. Like I said, when I started this, Book 2... yeah, exactly. Book 2 is one hell of a ride. If you thought Book 1 was good, you thought Prelude to Chaos was good, Winter Snow, man. Winter freaking Snow. Yeah. That. Oh, and also, Uso Emmy Supremacy! Let's go! Yeah, baby, yeah! For this, oh yeah, that's book 2, yeah, but book 4, yeah, Skunga, yeah. Skunga is canon. Skunga is canon in War of the Yokai in book 4. That's gonna be quite a while before we read book 4 on stream, though, because, we have to wait until book 4 has been uploaded to the Discord server, and right now we're still on the back end of book 3, so it'll be a little while before we get Skunga. But we'll get Skunga, and that probably is not going to be the voice I use for him, dear Jesus. But, yes. Oh, hi, Kome. Kome has come to say hi and drag her claws on the wall, which is like nails on a chalkboard. I really hope you enjoyed it. And, these VODs are going to be going up on YouTube very, very soon. Probably by this time tomorrow night. I'm gonna put them all up at once, just so that the viewers can have the whole experience without having to, wait. Oh, excuse me. There might be the name of the now, when you say the cats, do you mean in real life or in War of the Yokai? Because I only named Kome. And if you mean in the War of the Yokai, oh, the real ones. Yeah, Kome is named after Kome Shirisaka. And Bonnie is actually named after my mom's cat from when she was a kid. Bon Bon. You love the voices? Yeah. 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 I've been practicing these voices for years, so I'm glad you like them. I'll admit it's a little hard sometimes because you gotta go between you gotta go between Kiriko and then Hyoka while also making them make sure they sound separate. And then of course you got Mordred and you've got Emiko, who they both have the very. See, Emiko's not British. But that's the only posh accent I can really do. So, that's the problem there. Ray's supposed to be like, she's like a valley girl, just like, oh my god. Sarah's Irish. That's a fun one to do. Basically, I just got a channel share Gorath. That's how I do Sarah. Cheese for everyone. And then Nonami is just straight up Ray Ayanami. And then Usako is just me talking, but maybe a little more energetic, Put a little bit of juice into it. Yeah. And then, Lydia and Cecily are basically the same voice. You just got a lower pitch, higher pitch. And then the kittens. But anyway, you're not here for a voice acting primer. Maybe I'll do one of those one day, because I'm not professional by any stretch of the imagination. But I've had practice in doing lots of voices for many, many, many years, so I do have some tips. Anyway, I think we're going to end things here tonight. Tomorrow night, we'll be going back to video games proper. I am going to be in a collab with 3 others. We're going to be playing Borderlands 2. I've never played Borderlands 2. I've never played anything Borderlands. I've never even really seen footage from Borderlands. The only thing I know about Borderlands is the line, "I'm the conductor of the poop train." That's the only thing I know about that, and I'm not even 100% sure if that's Borderlands or something else. So, this should be interesting. I've been told that the character I'm going to be playing as is apparently someone that gets to blow stuff up. I don't know. We'll have to see. It should be fun. Should be fun. It'll be a later stream. It'll actually be 24 hours. Yeah, it'll be starting about 24 and a half hours from now. So at 8 p.m. Central Time. So that's 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, and whatever time zone you're in, Ray, that would be, I think, 10 o'clock your time. So, anyway, till next time, everyone. Thank you so much. This has been Book. This has been Winter Snow. You know what? Before we end here, why don't I just do a little preview image for, Book 3, huh? Why don't we do that? Add source, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing bang, bing bang. Not that one. Oh, no, not that one. That's from the alt account. This one. This is the promo. Here's the promo image. So, yeah, let me make it a little bigger here. Hold on. Wow. You see that? You see that girl on the left? You know who that is? You know who that is. You know who she is. Yeah. That's Hyoka. You can actually, if you look at the very left here, you can see where I had to crop her out of that image because I didn't have one prepped. A version of this that didn't have Hyoka. But this is the more accurate version for everyone's height and stuff. And Ray's figure. Because Ray is supposed to be built. She's like buff as hell. Think, what's her name? Noi? From Dorohedoro, I think is how you say it. Yeah, she's like that buff. Yeah. So, alright. Until tomorrow night, take care, have a good one. There will be one more Book 2 related stream, but we're going to save that for the 24th. When is the 24th again? Oh, it's a Saturday, good. Because that is the Christmas special. So I figure, why not do a Christmas in July thing, huh? Alright. Anyway, till tomorrow night. Take care, everyone. And sayonara.